I want to start with a question that sounds provocative, but is actually a structural analysis question. In this war, in the 46 days since American and Israeli forces struck Iran on February 28th, who has done the most damage to the American military position in the Middle East? Iran fired the missiles, Iran closed the strait, Iran attacked the destroyers, but Iran did not announce the position of 3 American carrier groups on social media before they attempted a surprise operation. Iran did not post that American destroyers were crossing the strait in real time, giving Iranian radar operators a targeting cue they might otherwise have had to work for. Iran did not cancel peace negotiations by publicly calling Iranian negotiators liars while Pakistani mediators were still in the room. Iran did not launch a military operation called Project Liberty without telling Saudi Arabia, turning America's most important Gulf partner into an adversary overnight. Iran did not post a Truth Social message calling India and China hellholes, handing Iran a free propaganda victory in the world's largest democracy that cost $0 and reached hundreds of millions of people. Iran did not do any of those things. The President of the United States did. I want to be precise about what I am arguing because precision matters here. I am not making a political argument. I am not arguing about whether this war was justified, whether Trump is a good or bad president, whether his domestic policies are working. I am making a structural argument about decision quality in a military conflict. And the structural argument is this. In every major reversal America has suffered in this war, the mechanism of the reversal can be traced to a specific action by America's own commander-in-chief that handed the adversary an advantage they did not previously have. This is not unprecedented in military history. There is a specific term for it, unforced errors. And the question I want to answer today is how America arrived at a situation in which its most consequential military adversary in 40 years is not Iran, not China, not Russia, but the person sitting in the Oval Office posting on Truth Social at 3 in the morning. Once you see the sequence, you cannot unsee it. And I want to walk you through every rung. Let me start with the operational security failures because these are the most concrete and the most documented. Unforced error 1. Trump posted on Truth Social that American destroyers were crossing the Strait of Hormuz under enemy fire in real time, while the operation was in progress. He did not post this after the operation concluded. He did not post it as a retrospective account of a successful mission. He posted it while 3 American warships were attempting a high-risk transit of a contested waterway controlled by an adversary that has demonstrated the ability to track American ships using Russian satellite data. The Iranian military did not need to wonder where those ships were. The President of the United States had just told them, with the specific ship names, the USS Truxtun, the USS Rafael Peralta, the USS Mason, posted on a social media platform with tens of millions of followers, including, with near certainty, Iranian military intelligence analyst whose entire job is to monitor American open source information for exactly this kind of operational data. What happened next? Iran attacked all 3 ships, coordinated, multi-vector, missiles, drones, fast boats. The operation was not a surprise. How could it be? America had announced it. CENTCOM said nothing was hit. Then American aircraft struck Iranian port infrastructure in what any honest military analyst would describe as retaliatory strikes. You do not conduct retaliatory strikes when nothing was hit. The official narrative collapsed within hours. And the gap between what CENTCOM said and what the observable evidence showed is its own kind of damage, because Allied military planners draw conclusions from that gap, and the conclusion they draw is not reassuring. Unforced error 2. Project Liberty. Trump announced on social media that America was launching a new operation to escort commercial vessels out of the Strait of Hormuz. He presented it with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense. He described it as a humanitarian mission. He stated that ships were already moving normally under American naval escort. He said this before calling Mohammed bin Salman, before consulting the government of the country that hosts America's primary air operations base for the entire Gulf theater, before notifying the partner whose airspace American aircraft would need to operate the mission he had just announced to the world. Saudi Arabia's response was immediate. MBS called Trump. The call resolved nothing. Prince Sultan Air Base was closed to American operations. Saudi airspace was denied. Kuwait followed within hours. Project Liberty was canceled in less than 48 hours. Trump said he canceled it because it had been a successful mission. Satellite imagery showed 2 American warships receiving Iranian warning shots and withdrawing. One ship exited the strait through a channel controlled by Iran with Iranian permission. The operation that Trump announced before consulting his most important regional partner ended in a withdrawal that his most important regional partner refused to cover. The adversary did not outmaneuver Project Liberty. Trump outmaneuvered Project Liberty by announcing it before it was ready, to an adversary that was listening. Unforced error 3. The negotiating announcements. Trump posted multiple times on Truth Social about the progress of negotiations with Iran. He said Iran was close to a deal. He said a memorandum of understanding had been reached. He said the second round of Islamabad talks was scheduled and imminent. Every single one of these announcements was either false, premature, or made without Iranian confirmation. Iran's foreign minister publicly stated he had not agreed to a second round of talks. Iran's parliament speaker posted that the operation Trump was describing had failed. Iranian state media called the outlet Trump leaked to Foxios, Fox plus Axios, for its willingness to publish unverified American government claims. What do premature negotiation announcements do to a negotiation? They tell the other side what you need. They tell the other side that you are under domestic political pressure to show progress. They tell the other side that the public narrative matters more to you than the actual outcome. And they tell every third-party mediator in the process, Pakistan, Turkey, Oman, Egypt, that the American side cannot maintain operational discipline about what is said publicly and what is held back for the negotiating room. Pakistan's credibility as a mediator was directly damaged when it issued a statement about an Iranian ministerial visit that Iran immediately contradicted. The statement had been shaped by the American side's need to show progress that did not exist. The mediator took the reputational cost. Iran walked away from the table. Again, unforced error 4. The hellhole post. Trump reposted a letter on Truth Social in which India and China were described as hellholes. He endorsed the letter. He put his presidential imprimatur on the characterization of the world's largest democracy, the cornerstone of America's Indo-Pacific strategy, the country whose alignment on China policy is the most consequential diplomatic variable in the next 30 years, as a hellhole. Iran's consulates in India responded within hours. They posted videos of Mumbai and Hyderabad. They called India a cradle of civilization. They argued publicly about which Indian city was more beautiful. They did this for free, on social media. And it went viral across India, hundreds of millions of shares. The Iranian government, a government at war with America under naval blockade, with its military infrastructure degraded by 46 days of bombardment, emerged from a social media cycle as India's defender while America's president had called India a hellhole. The Indian government issued a carefully worded diplomatic non-response that was more damaging than any protest could have been, because a carefully worded non-response from the world's largest democracy to the characterization of its country as a hellhole by the president of its most important strategic partner is a political verdict. It is the language of a government that has decided its population's feelings about America have to be managed rather than expressed. Iran spent $0, got hundreds of millions of viral impressions in the country America most needs in the Indo-Pacific, and the President of the United States provided the ammunition for free. Now, I want to use a framework here that I think explains the pattern. I call it the self-targeting sequence, and it is distinct from ordinary political mistakes or even from bad military strategy. The self-targeting sequence works like this. A military or diplomatic operation is designed with a specific objective. The operational security of that objective depends on the adversary not knowing certain things: the timing, the location, the terms, the partners involved. Before the operation can execute, the commander-in-chief announces the operation publicly, revealing the timing, the location, the terms, or the partners. The adversary uses that information to prepare a countermeasure. The countermeasure succeeds. The operation fails or is degraded. The commander-in-chief claims the operation was a success anyway. The gap between the claim and the observable evidence is noted by every ally watching. Look at how many American operations in this war fit that sequence. The destroyer Transit, announced before execution, attacked during transit. Project Liberty, announced before Saudi consultation, canceled after Saudi rupture. The second round of Islamabad talks, announced before Iranian confirmation, contradicted by Iran publicly, never occurred. The Iranian negotiating framework, leaked before finalization, rejected by Iran publicly, described as a surrender document by Iranian state media. In each case, the self-targeting mechanism is the same. Operational information released publicly before the operation can succeed. And in each case, the release is not the result of a leak or an intelligence failure. It is a voluntary disclosure by the commander-in-chief made for domestic political consumption that transforms an operational advantage into an adversarial gift. There is a historical parallel that is worth sitting with. In the First World War, the British government faced intense domestic political pressure to demonstrate that the war was being managed competently. That pressure produced a series of premature announcements about operations that had not yet succeeded, negotiations that had not yet concluded, and military advances that were more optimistic than the ground reality warranted. Each premature announcement complicated the operation it was describing. The adversary read British newspapers. The adversary adjusted. The operations failed more often and cost more lives than they would have if the domestic political pressure to show progress had not driven premature disclosure. The mechanism is the same. Domestic political pressure produces premature disclosure. Premature disclosure degrades operational security. Degraded operational security produces operational failure. Operational failure produces worse domestic political pressure. The cycle accelerates. America is in that cycle right now, and the person driving it is not Iran. It is the person whose approval ratings drive the decision to post. Now let me address the strongest counter-argument because intellectual honesty requires it. The counter-argument goes like this. Trump's posts are strategic. He is using social media as a pressure tool. When he announces operations publicly, he is signaling resolve to Iran and to domestic audiences simultaneously. When he posts about negotiations, he is creating diplomatic pressure. When he described the destroyers crossing under fire, he was communicating that America would not be deterred. None of this is accidental. It is a negotiating style that worked in business and is being applied to geopolitics. This is a serious argument, and I want to acknowledge its weight before I tell you what it misses. What it misses is the asymmetry of the cost. In business negotiations, both sides benefit from knowing the other side's position. Transparency can build trust and accelerate agreement. In military operations, operational security is not a negotiating chip. It is a precondition for survival. When Trump posted the names of the 3 destroyers crossing the strait, the cost of that post was measured in missiles, in fast attack boats. In whatever damage those ships sustained, that CENTCOM said was 0, and that subsequent American retaliatory strikes contradict. Negotiating pressure is worth something, but it is not worth operational security in a contested waterway. The second thing the counter-argument misses is the ally dimension. Negotiating pressure on Iran through public posts might be strategically defensible even if tactically costly. Destroying the alliance relationship with Saudi Arabia by announcing a military operation without consultation is not a negotiating tactic. It is an unforced error that removed America's primary air operations base in the Gulf theater. Prince Sultan Air Base is not a negotiating chip. It is a critical piece of military infrastructure whose loss degrades every operation America needs to run in the region, and it was lost not to Iranian military action, but to a social media announcement that preceded a consultation call that never happened. Let me connect this to what it means for you watching this in the United States. The most direct cost is the basing. 10 countries have expelled or restricted American military access. Replacing that basing capability with carrier operations and distant installations costs more. The Defense Department budget is finite. Higher operational costs mean either reduced capability or reduced domestic spending. That is your tax bill. That is your infrastructure funding. That is your education and healthcare spending. That does not happen because the defense budget is absorbing the cost of operating without the forward bases that a half-century of alliance relationships made possible, and that a half-century of alliance relationships were destroyed in 30 days. The negotiating cost lands on the duration of the war. Every negotiation that fails because the American side leaked its position before the room was ready is a negotiation that has to be restarted from scratch with less credibility on the American side. Every restart extends the war by weeks. Every week the war extends, oil stays above $100 per barrel. Every week oil stays above $100, your grocery bill, your gas price, your heating cost, your transportation cost is higher than it would be if the negotiation had concluded. The social media post that torpedoed the second round of Islamabad talks did not cost Iran anything. It cost you every dollar above the pre-war oil price for every week since. The alliance cost lands on your long-term security. America's ability to deter future conflicts depends on its allies believing that American commitments are reliable and that American operations are competently managed. Every unforced error, every false official statement, every premature announcement, every ally that wakes up to learn about an operation that affects their territory from a Truth Social post, these degrade the deterrence value of the American alliance. A deterrence architecture that has been visibly degraded by the behavior of its own commander-in-chief is a deterrence architecture that invites testing. And testing costs lives and money in ways that do not show up in any single news cycle, but accumulate into the strategic environment your children inherit. I want to close with the question that this analysis raises and that nobody in mainstream coverage is asking directly. If the pattern is this consistent, if every major American reversal in this war can be traced to a specific post or announcement by the commander-in-chief, then the question is not whether Iran is winning. The question is whether America can win any war that its own commander-in-chief is simultaneously undermining through a compulsive need to narrate every operation in real time to a domestic political audience. That is not a partisan question. It is a structural question about civil-military relations, about the compatibility of modern social media behavior with wartime operational security, and about what happens to the world's most powerful military when the person at its apex is making decisions based on tweet engagement rather than operational calculus. I do not know the answer. What I know is that Iran's military has not been the primary source of American operational setbacks in this war. The primary source has been voluntary disclosure of operational information by America's own leadership. That is the most unusual military situation I have analyzed in years. And it is the situation that no amount of carrier groups, no amount of interceptor missiles, no amount of forward basing can compensate for. Because the vulnerability is not geographic, it is not technological, it is not financial, it is architectural. It is built into the decision-making process at the top of the command chain. Watch what Trump posts today, not for the content, for the operational information it voluntarily reveals. Because whatever he posts is being read right now by Iranian military intelligence, by Russian satellite operators, by Saudi palace advisors, by Chinese strategic analysts, by every government that is watching this conflict and making calculations about American reliability. And they are drawing the same conclusion from the same evidence that I am drawing right now. America's biggest strategic problem in this war is not in Tehran. It is in the Oval Office. And until that problem is named clearly and honestly, it cannot be addressed. Tell me in the comments, do you think the social media behavior of a commander-in-chief during wartime should have limits? And if so, who is responsible for enforcing them? I read every comment. I want to know what you think. The people around you are watching the missiles and the ceasefire clock. They are missing the self-targeting sequence, the one where America's most consequential adversary in this conflict is posting from the residence at 3 in the morning. Share this with one person who thinks America is losing because of Iran, because Iran is not the reason America is losing. This is the analysis that matters. And we will be here for every chapter of what comes next.